Welcome to this week's episode of the Casual Shooters Podcast. Today it's just me and Huggy. Leo couldn't make it.
Hey.
He got stuck. He's blocked out by a firewall. What are the odds? I'm sure he's ranting and raving as we speak. This week we have another guest. This is another awesome guest. It's Scott Siegmund. He's a vice president of Accuracy International, located right here in Fredericksburg. So we're going to talk to him for a little bit, find out about some Accuracy International rifles and the history behind it. So let's go ahead and bring Scott in now. Hey, Scott.
Yeah, good afternoon, gentlemen, and good afternoon, everyone out there in podcast land.
There you go. So, Scott, we know you're, as I've introduced you, you're vice president of Accuracy International. I assume the North American branch, or I don't know how you term that.
Yeah, we're AI North America. We're a subsidiary of AI Ltd, which is based in Portsmouth, England, and we service the North American market, which is the 50 states. Canada is serviced out of the UK, so we cover the 50 United States.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Scott, how did you? Actually, we're going to back up for a second. What we normally do is ask them surprise questions to get to know our guest. So the first question we typically ask is, what's your favorite movie?
Oh my God, I'm so not a movie. Yeah, that's.
And no, it cannot be an Accuracy International documentary.
No, so I'll preface that. My wife and I have not been to the theater in just about 5 years, and a lot of it's due to kind of I just feel like a lot of people in this country are being dissed and insulted by Hollywood, and I have a hard time giving them money.
I hear that.
But the last movie, and this dates me a little bit, I absolutely love the movie Gran Torino.
Oh, another Clint Eastwood fan.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I thought Clint Eastwood was brilliant in Gran Torino, and I could totally watch that movie 5 more times and enjoy it every time.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I had to, when they interviewed me and asked me the question, I had to go with the outlaw Josie Wales.
Oh, yeah?
I did. Absolutely love that movie. But I love so many of his movies. It's crazy.
That's kind of an interesting contrast, young Eastwood and old Eastwood. It's kind of almost at bookends of his movie career.
Yeah, darn near.
Yeah. So,
all right, throw one at him, Chris. Huggy.
Oh, okay. Well, here's a question for you. And again, it's just getting to know you and having some fun questions. But what is your favorite book to read? What is one of your favorite books, authors that you like?
It's probably a bit easier than the movie question. I'm a big fan of Ayn Rand.
Okay.
The author of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, and a lot of sort of smaller books on her various theories. And Rand, those are deep reads. Those books, there's a lot in an Ayn Rand book, but anybody that reads Rand today would look around at our world and our country, and you have to marvel at how on point she was. The Fountainhead he started writing that book in the late 1930s, and I believe it was published not long after the end of World War II. And reading it today, we look around and we think, wow, we've been in this socialist leftist day. Not to steer the conversation too far into politics, but you did ask what was one of my favorite books.
My 18-year-old son likes Ayn Rand.
Really?
Yep.
I'm impressed. That's not a book that many 18-year-olds can.
Nope, I agree. I was surprised.
I would venture he can read that book another 5 times throughout his life and appreciate it all over.
I totally agree. Okay, so what's your favorite caliber?
Oh, I have several, but a favorite caliber, I would say my all-around favorite is the 6.5 by 4.7 Lapua.
Okay.
It's a slightly. Are you guys familiar with that cartridge?
I can't say that I am
Mm-hmm.
from a ballistic standpoint, so I'd be curious to hear why.
Yeah, so it's a sort of very similar to a 6.5 Creedmoor, but it's I got into shooting it before Lapua was making Creedmoor brass cases, and it was designed kind of like the Creedmoor to be an all-out high accuracy cartridge. And so everything about the design is right. The neck, the keyboard, the casing, runs a small primer, will drive a 140 in mid 2700 to do targets with it fairly long distance hunt with it. It's dead easy to load for. It's a lot like a 308. It's hard to build a bad load.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
In fact, I'll likely be shooting one Saturday over at Quantico. There's a one-day PRS that I'm registered for, even though it's going to rain. But I'll probably put a 6.547 barrel on my rifle and shoot that.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
But
they're just
Yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to shoot a 338 myself. I do want to. I've heard a lot of, stuff about the 338. The next rifle I actually wanted to get was the Ruger Precision 338 myself, and try that. But I had to say, after looking at a lot of stuff, especially when Dave introduced me to AI, and I really started looking at a lot of the rifles you all have designed and everything, I was kind of like taken back, and I'm like, wow, my eyes were open to another realm, and I'm like, oh no, look at this.
Yeah, the 338 Lapua is one of the most all-around capable cartridges ever designed, and it truly is a long-distance cartridge. And in fact, I think it was 2019, the last year I shot the ELR Steel Challenge in Wyoming. I shot the 338 and loaded the 300 grain Burger hybrids, and it's just phenomenally accurate. And that match has targets reaching out past 2,000 yards, and great capability with that round. I would offer just some basic advice: is if you buy a 338, get a rifle that's truly designed to handle it, and that's not a big field of guns. That's AI Barrett, Socko M10. What else is reasonable? Surgeon made a 338 XL that we developed a chassis for. You need a big enough action for those larger barrels, and a lot of the lower end guns are basically just they're guns that were designed for 308s and 30-06 and sort of been stretched out to fit a really big cartridge, and so they're kind of like a real hobby gun. They allow you to shoot the round, but they rarely allow the round to show you its potential.
like a sporter rifle.
Yeah, it's like a guy that buys an 883 Harley, and then in 5 days he wishes he got 1200 or a lowrider or something like that, right?
Right.
You know where I'm coming from?
Yes, sir.
Like this dude Froggy, my brother's neighbor, used to say. My brother Rick asked Froggy about the 883, and he says, "Rick," he goes, "it's for her. It ain't for you."
Nice.
Right. Right. So, yeah, 338.
So, how did
Nice.
you come about? Well, first off, let's back up. Can you give us a 1 to 2 minute synopsis of the history of AI?
Oh, yeah, 2 minutes. Okay. Let's see if I can pack that into 2 minutes. So the company, the original two guys that started the company are still alive today. And that's Dave Walls, who's still one of the owners, and Dave Kaag. And they worked together. They were trained machinists and they were also competitive shooters. They shot in the same club. They worked together and they were very accomplished shooters. And they set out to kind of design a better center fire target rifle than really what they were able to provide at the time. And so they did, and then they became friends with a guy named Malcolm Cooper, and Malcolm was an international champion shooter for England. In fact, Malcolm won 2 gold medals for England in 2 different Olympics. And so they got tied up, and Malcolm shot 300 meters very successfully, like he won international championships. He's 300 meters for good. And the two Daves built rifles for Malcolm Cooper, and they were really good. I mean, they borrowed ideas from bench rest guns and other target guns, and they kind of fixed everything they found deficient in the rifles that were available. And later on, there were approached to supply a rifle to a sniper rifle trial. The AMRB was looking to replace the L47 Lee Enfield, an old wood stock sniper rifle, and so they took the action, basically the action and barrel they developed if they're going to do their shooting, and they developed an alloy chassis to put that barreled action on, and that really was kind of a game changing paradigm shift in sniper rifles. Is that aluminum chassis allowed a rigid structure to hang accessories on. You could make the mag aperture perfect and feed the thing reliably from a 10-round box magazine. You could put a bipod on it. We all came through that world of fiberglass stocks on our tactical and target guns, and
Mm-hmm.
we've all had stuff pull out of them, and they've gotten a lot better at strengthening them today. But how many people do you know that pulled a T-slot rail out or pick rail or the bipod mount pulled out because it was basically a blob of fiberglass, stuck in some very soft fill. And so that aluminum chassis gave the gun incredible durability and a consistent rigid mounting surface. And so that rifle became known as the police marksman or the PM. And then not long after that, MOD got serious about replacing that Lee Enfield rifle and had a full-on trial. And AI, who was very small, just a kind of almost a shed type operation at the time, ended up winning that trial.
Oh, wow.
The story that Dave Walls tells about that is really amazing, where the MOD were like, okay, well, now that you've been selected to supply the sniper rifle, we need to come and see where you make it. And they didn't really have much of an operation to shut.
I think I've actually heard this story, so this is a good one.
Yeah, this is absolute truth. And so they had been sourcing some parts from a supplier, like a job shop, which was a pretty large operation. And they went and got these guys to agree to let them tour the MOD guys through that place like it was AI. And that's what they did. But that initial contract was to supply a little over 1,200 308 sniper rifles to the MOD, and that gun became designated as the L96A1. And it's also lovingly called the Green Meanie by, British snipers who carried that gun in service. But an enormously successful rifle. That's really like England's version of an M40, if you will. But the difference between the M40 and the L96 is that the L96 was designed soup to nuts for a sniper application. There's not a deer hunting L96, right? In our country, all of our sniper rifles until very recent times have been repurposed hunting guns, and they always come with compromises inherent to a low-cost design. They've been made to work remarkably well, but as well as I do, when you're looking at an M40, you're not looking at much of a 700 Remington. It's soup to nuts, something that's created over at Quantico, and the
Right.
700 Action is the only thing that came out of Ilion, and then that's heavily modified to become an M40. So there, I'm probably way past 2 minutes.
That's okay.
But that winning that MOD trial and supplying the L96 put AI firmly in the world of sniper rifle manufacturers. And then being a European company, other European military organizations, as they sought to replace their aging platforms, AI was invited to participate in these various trials. And the next big one was for the Swedish Army, and being in Sweden is very cold. And so some of the challenges with extreme cold, like -40 temperatures, are that if you get moisture in the gun, it can be difficult to operate. And so the L96 got a number of modifications resulting from that trial, and it became designated the AW, or the Arctic Warfare, and that's the one that kind of the rest of the world got to know very well.
Yeah, that was the one I was most familiar with.
Yeah, and I still have the first AW that I purchased. I think it's a 98 serial number, so it's got some years on it now. And,
yeah, I guess so.
Yeah. In fact, it's in the vault here at work. It stays here more than it does at home.
Really?
Yeah. I still shoot it, but so the AW was born really out of that Swedish trial, and a number of enhancements. They changed the safety design and made it more robust and reliable. They added features to the bolt to help it clear frozen, ice and water and debris. The safety shroud was changed. The design of the stock overlays were changed and went to injection molded polymer.
Okay.
So it really was a whole suite of improvements, and from there, the German Army was the one that they ended up procuring the first 300 Win Mag and the first folding chassis that AI produced. It was AWSM 300 Win Mag, and they, believe it or not, they are still running those rifles, albeit they've been back to the factory for a big upgrade.
Oh, I'm sure.
All those Swedish guns came back to the factory a few years ago for upgrades as AI added, newer features, pick rails and folding stocks and different bipod mounts and all of that. They, rather than just toss it and go with a completely new gun, it was viable for them to send them all back to the factory to kind of get remade with the newest updates.
Wow, you don't hear that very often. Normally it's like, we'll just buy new ones.
Exactly. And then I think it was around in the late 1980s, AI got into a development, kind of a partnership with Lapua Ammunition on developing the 338 Lapua cartridge. And AI, I believe, was the first commercial manufacturer to offer a 338 sniper rifle, and I think that was followed shortly after by Sako with the TRG. And both of the companies, Sako and AI, I think for a very long time competed almost exclusively in 338 trials. There were not many players for a very long time.
I can see that.
Yeah. But that 338 Super Magnum kind of marked an end point of what you could do with that basic AW action. And then I think SOCOM had been toying around with the idea here in the United States of having a 338. And they talked about having a trial for years, right? Well, then it finally became serious, and they had the first solicitation, I think it was in 2011 or 2010. And they had released a very detailed draft specification, and AI, like several other companies, developed a rifle to address that. And that was the first generation of AX. And the most fundamental change on the AX is they started with a clean sheet of paper on the receiver, and that action was truly designed to handle that big 338 cartridge. The barrel diameter got bigger, the action got bigger, the bolt got bigger, the breech got stronger.
So I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. When you say the action got bigger, did it get thicker? Is that what you mean? Like just what changed with the action?
Yeah, so the barrel tenon around the chamber increased in diameter by 3 millimeter. Well, that's a big move. That's like close to 1/4 of an inch. And what that does is it adds a lot more material around that case. When you take an inch 250 piece of barrel stock and you ream a 308 chamber in it, well, that's 475 thou diameter. And then you can punch it out to, say a 308 up to a 300. Now you're at 535. And then when you ream that out further to a 338 Lapua, what is that, 6 something? I mean, your wall thickness around that cartridge is getting
Thin.
kind of marginal now,
right?
And that chamber starts depending to a much higher degree on the receiver for overall integrity of the system, more than you would really want. So with the AX going with that much larger diameter tenon, and then the action had to grow to accommodate that bigger barrel, the strength of that thing made a huge move. That if you can back up the case head, that barrel doesn't need an action to safely fire that round. It will handle it without the receiver, right? So other things that the AX brought was the AW 338 and 300 Win Mag were 5-round single stack magazine architecture. And so this gun runs a double stack mag in 338, just like the AW ran 10 rounds of 308.
Okay.
I mean, I think most people acknowledge we have the best 338 magazine on the planet. There's really not a good comparable product out there. I think most of the other mags are polymer, which typically lack the durability of a good steel mag. Other things, we went to a tubular 4-end architecture, and that's when we introduced the key slot interface, which has been really successful and very strong. SOCOM wanted to put Picatinny rail like pretty much everywhere on the gun. Oh, we got another guest in there.
Yeah, I have 3 Great Danes. Occasionally, they like to wander over and get in on the camera action.
Wow, I thought that was a call. Good. Yeah, so the AX was introduced to the market around I think we brought Scott show in 2010, and that was a big paradigm shift in features and performance of the system, and then later that was further upgraded to multi-caliber capability, the AXMC, which we still make in a law enforcement version. And that really gave the user the ability to swap barrels and complete cartridge families. Like, if you're experienced at doing it, you can do a caliber change under a minute. If you've never done it before, it might take you 2 minutes. And we migrated that technology down to the short action AX, which we still make. And that really that kind of ended sort of the monopoly market that custom gunsmiths had on, like, if you need a new barrel, you got to ship the gun off and hope they have it back to you within 6 months. If you got an AI, you don't need a gunsmith. We can ship you a barrel that's all chambered up and guaranteed the headspace on your action.
And I remember, I mean, that was even advertised when Malcolm came to the school in the early 90s. That was one of the benefits. Let's say Chris or me, we have an AI and we want to rebarrel it ourselves. What kind of tools do we need and how long does it take?
Well, a modern AI, you need a 4mm hex drive, and you need a barrel, whatever barrel you're putting on. And if it involves, let's say it's an AXMC, right? And you bought it as a 338, and now you want to run a 6.5 Creedmoor. Well, to take the barrel off, you need a 4mm hex drive, and you loosen a clamp screw about 1.5 to 2 turns, and literally just take the barrel off with your hands. It threads into the receiver
with a hex screw.
Yeah, the hex screw, there's a clamping mechanism that draws a section of the bottom part of the receiver tight into those threads. And once that's brought up to torque of about, 50 inch-pounds, you would then need about 90 foot-pounds to move the barrel. So they're very, very efficient clamp. Okay. But the barrel still threads in the conventional way. It doesn't use a breech extension architecture like some of the modern 338s do. But it also opens the door for a lot more access to barrels. Once you have a breech extension, you have to depend on that manufacturer to supply that part. And a lot of them are very precious about selling breech extensions. They want to sell you an entire barrel with a breech extension fitted. And I think one of the reasons for that is that's how they have to set up headspace. I think it's fundamental to the design that headspace is set with the barrel still chucked into the lathe, so to speak. And so some of the guns available in 338 today, when you buy a replacement barrel, it may have to also come with a new bolt head. And so you've bought a little mini system to put into your rifle to achieve headspace, and we don't do it that way.
Okay.
The AXMC with a very large bolt and lock ring, it's hard for those don't lose headspace quickly through wear and tear and even very high pressure situations. That breech is super durable. We've had some 308s come in even with 6-lug bolts where guys will build some dangerously high pressure loads, and after they fire, a half a dozen of them, they might gain a little headspace. But I look at it, it's like, well, you bought an insurance policy there because the gun didn't blow up. Like, believe it or not, I mean, you hear stories all the time, but we see them come in where guys have literally loaded 308s with pistol powder in them. And I'm telling you what, it isn't pretty, but I've never seen an AI explode yet.
Wow, that's pushing the envelope. Goodness.
Yeah, I have a barrel on the cabinet behind my desk right now. It was, a guy had taken delivery last year of a brand new AXMC 338 and left a stainless steel laser bore sighter in the muzzle and loaded her up and fired it. And that barrel split from the muzzle all the way back to the receiver, and the crack goes into the three front threads of the breech thread.
Wow.
And he was able to open a bolt without any undue effort and take the case out, and the receiver still passed headspace.
Oh, wow. That's impressive.
Frank Green from Bartlein Barrels was here yesterday afternoon, and it's one of their barrel blanks that we buy a lot of barrel blanks from them. And I said, "Hey, here's one of your barrels, Frank." And he went out to his car and brought one in to show me that a customer had loaded. It was a hunting weight barrel, but he had loaded a full case of pistol powder and a short Magnum. And that was something to see. That guy went to the hospital.
Really?
That one was not on it.
I don't know why people do that kind of thing.
I don't know. Best practice at the loading bench is only have the gunpowder out that you're loading. Everything else needs to be put away in a cabinet somewhere where you can't conveniently reach it.
Yeah. So I guess it was a mistake.
If you mess up cooking a dish in your kitchen, you can just scrape it into the trash can. But if you mess up at the loading bench, you can get an ambulance ride to the hospital.
Not good.
Yeah. So wow, how long are we on? How many minutes am I into my 2 minutes now?
I think it's only 3 or 4.
Yeah, so that brought us up to the AXMC. I mean, do you want to ask questions or you want me to keep talking?
Yeah. No. All right. So you guys started with the whole bench rest and then sniper stuff. Huggy, I think I'm getting a big echo with you.
Yeah, not really bench rest, but positional type shooting, like 300 meter in Europe. What they call full bore in Europe, which they shoot at Bisley, kind of like our NRA high power series.
Okay.
That was kind of the driving factor to develop a better target rifle. But I'll back up a little bit. The original L96 and AW up to the current AXMC, those actions were always screwed and bonded to the chassis, and that was kind of a bench rest thing. Using both action screws and epoxy sort of bedding compound to make that action up to the stock system. It was a very robust and very bomb-proof way to tie up the action and chassis. When we came out with the quick change barrel system, it's been a really robust system, but maybe once every couple of years we get a gun in where some guy managed to twist the head off of the clamp screw. And then to service that, you have to unbond the action and replace the screw and rebond it. So it's a fairly labor intensive process to replace a very inexpensive part. And so the current multi-cow gun, which is the AXSR, has eliminated the bond and it's tied onto the chassis with 5 action screws. And we have enough testing and fielding of that system to have total confidence in the non-bonded approach as well. Our 50 cal, by the way, was never bonded from the beginning. It always was just screwed to the receiver with like 4 large action screws.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Now it seems like, looking at the websites, you guys are now starting to market towards PRS shooters as well as military. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. Here in the States, we got involved with PRS competition, I think back around 2014. And when the series was kind of in its early days, it really was born out of from a bunch of guys that had cool tactical rifles like AIs and other guns, and they wanted to compete. And as the series really became popular and grew, then the rifles became a lot more specialized, as is really inevitable. If you know anything about IPSC shooting and what happened with that sport, it was born out at, Arizona with Jeff Cooper and that bunch. And it really was like, here's a pistols we can go buy at the gun shop, and we're going to learn how to shoot them a lot better. And if you look at a unlimited IPSC gun today, I mean, you never carry that as a defensive weapon. They're sort of freak shows, and PRS guns haven't gone that far yet. But there still are really no restrictions on the rifles, and so they've kind of evolved to be faster and more efficient to shoot from improvised positions and barricades. And we introduced in January the ATX, which has a chassis architecture that's definitely geared toward that sport. It also happens to be certainly not giving up really anything as a sniper platform. It really carries forward all the key features that an AI sniper rifle has, but it's really an efficient gun to shoot off of bags or a barricade or any kind of improvised surface. So, yeah, we are, it's an acknowledgement that it's an important market here in the United States and abroad. I mean, PRS style competition is growing very much in Europe and South Africa and Australia and New Zealand. So the reach of that sport has become very wide.
I knew about it in the U.S., but I was unaware of around the world. And the reason I was asking is your ASR is 15.2 pounds without a scope and ammo. That's
Okay.
To be carrying around in a military role, that's a pretty heavy gun once you add scope and ammo. I have no idea where that feedback is coming from.
Yeah, so on that SOCOM P-spec for the ASR, I think you could have gone up to, I believe it was 17 pound. And we chose not to make the gun as light as we could make it, because in large calibers like the 338, you're trading off portability against shootability and accuracy performance. And we have a lot of data to support that. If we kept, like, compared to the AXMC 338, we added about 1.8 pounds of weight in the barrel of the ASR, but overall the gun weighs very much the same as the original AXMC, but it's a far more shootable gun because it concentrates that mass around the bore.
Okay.
So in terms of, when you have to hook a bullet up with a target that's out at 1500 or farther, that gun needs to work for you, and that isn't going to be the lightest gun out there.
No, I agree. So,
like, we could knock some weight off that thing by putting a carbon wrap barrel on and a lighter profile, and we could take weight out of it in a lot of ways. But when you squeeze the trigger, you lose everything through the scope, and then you're having to reacquire the target and see if you actually hit it or not.
So that's the 338 then?
Yeah, you mentioned the ASR. That's the one under discussion. And,
Okay. Now, does that come in a different caliber?
yeah, the primary sniper round of the ASR is the 300 Norma Magnum, which is probably as large a 30 as you would ever want to shoot. So that 300 Norma will drive a 220 grain bullet at just about 3,000 feet per second. So the recoil on that, while not at 338 levels, is also pretty high. Because you're burning, God, close to like 89 grains of gunpowder behind that bullet.
Wow.
And people often forget that the propellant charge factors enormously into the recoil pulse of the rifle. Once the bullet exits, you have basically a rocket engine expelling whatever mass of propellant was back in that case. Solid fuel rocket, right?
Goodness.
Yeah. So big cartridges just hit back harder.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things I had shot. I'm going to assume it was the AW 338 back in the mid 90s.
Yes.
And I always compared that recoil to a 12 gauge, your standard 12 gauge double aught buck. Very manageable. You could shoot it all day. And I always assumed it was based on, one, the gun was not the lightest gun, but it wasn't super heavy either, but also the muzzle brake on the end. Now, how much do you guys spend designing the muzzle brake to help with that recoil as well?
Yeah, I think by the mid 90s, you probably shot a gun with the newer design muzzle brake, which was a much larger 4-port brake.
Mm-hmm.
And my earliest recollection of shooting an AI 338 is it was about the most painful rifle I had ever shot because it had a brake. It had a muzzle brake that wasn't really designed to arrest recoil so much as it was made to mount a suppressor on the end of the gun.
Okay.
And so the port efficiency of that early brake was terrible, and they really were tough on recoil. The newer brake is like a sea change in recoil reduction. They're very effective. And in the last year and a half here in the US, we've been sourcing a 4-port vector rear vectoring brake from APA to put on those guns. And that's another move in recoil reduction effectiveness. Those newer brakes are really efficient. The trade-off is side and rear blast.
Right.
And in those big cartridges, like in 300 Norma and 338 Lapua, I don't even want to shoot them. I mean, if I can't shoot those guns suppressed, I don't want to shoot them.
Really?
Oh, they're horrible. Those big brakes, and I think a lot of the shooters, like in PRS today, are going to lose a lot of hearing at a very young age because of the multi-port brakes that are on guns now. Even small caliber guns, the angle brakes are just absolutely brutal. We're leaving in a couple of weeks' time to go down to Florida for the AI Long Range Classic. It's a match we've sponsored. It will be 6 years running now. And at the end of the first day of the match last year on Saturday, God, there's almost nobody shooting a suppressor anymore. And I remember walking back toward the parking area and talking to Doug Koenig, who shoots RPR for Ruger. And Doug just went back to the hotel and hung out with his wife. I mean, you're just sort of so beaten up from the noise that you don't feel like going out for dinner and socializing with your friends. And I think it's really done a lot to take some of the fun out of it. So, that's one of the down breaks, make guns more manageable, but they also make them harder on the shooter.
Now, are people using double hearing protection in those matches?
I hope so.
I didn't know if it was like a standard or that's just what people were doing or not. I mean,
I think, even with double hearing protection, at the end of the day, you just don't want to be around gun noise anymore, right? I mean, I love guns and I love shooting as much as anybody walking, but at the end of a long day of shooting with, great guns in close proximity, it's like I've just had enough. I would love to shoot some matches where the only thing allowed is suppressors.
Okay.
I love suppressors more and more.
No, I have not heard about this AI Long Range Classic. We're in Florida, and what's the setup for the match?
It's near Baker, Florida, at a shooting facility called Altus Shooting Solutions, and you can look up the match on Practice Score or the PRS website, or you can go to Altus website and find it. But
Okay.
it's just a 2-day. It's one of the series matches. It's really well attended. It's one of the early season matches after people have been cooped up for the cold part of winter and everybody's ready to go have some fun shooting. And the weather's usually good down there in the Panhandle in March. It can be chilly sometimes, but mostly by the afternoon it'll be in the upper 70s and really nice.
I was a year ago this past weekend I was in Frostproof shooting the USPSA Florida Open, and it was 80 degrees. It was fantastic weather. So it was just about an hour south of Orlando is where it was. So yeah, this time of year down in Florida is quite bearable.
Definitely.
Well, that's interesting. I will definitely look that up on Practice Score and follow that. That'll be interesting.
Yeah, and you should consider coming to Quantico and shooting some of those one-day matches. We'll be there as often as possible.
Now they're going to be that's just brand new, isn't it? Starting that up.
Yeah. One of the officers out there that's over the shooting programs has undertaken to run. I think he's running 7 or 8 rimfire series matches and 7 or 8 PRS one-day matches.
So NRL?
Yes, I think it's a combination of like NRLX and Mars series, which is Mid-Atlantic Rimfire series. And
okay.
So the NRLX series gives the RO a lot more flexibility in designing courses of fire, whereas the straight NRL series has a very tightly canned course of fire month over month, where everybody across the entire country is shooting exactly the same COF.
Okay. I had no idea.
Yeah. And that can be fun too, especially if you're newer to rimfire shooting. Those NRL matches are very good.
In this day and age with ammo prices, it's probably a lot more affordable.
And I'll give another just a shout out for all of the 22 rimfire match series. It's about the only form of shooting that I've seen moms and dads bringing their sons and daughters out to shoot, and so that's very encouraging to see.
Yeah,
it's sort of family friendly sport, and I like that a lot. It's fun to see kids coming out with like a Ruger 1022 or some gun like that and having a great time.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I think anytime you get kids involved, it's fantastic.
We have to. I mean, we can't take this to the grave with ourselves.
No, it's really the only way to maintain our rights too. So, is to make that generation aware and get them involved, and hopefully they vote that way.
Absolutely.
Now, which range are they using at Quantico for the PRS shoot?
Range 4.
Okay, so they're just going to put targets up on the in between the berms the lateral berms and then downrange.
Yeah, I printed out the COF for the PRS match yesterday, and I think the first 5 stages will be at the 700 or 800 yard line, and then the second 5 move back to 1,000. So kind of will run in a split, so to speak. I think they'll run us all through 1 to 5, and then we'll back up and shoot the second 5 at a different distance and different barricade setups.
I guess the colonel out there isn't worried about the range being tore up.
You know, I don't know. I don't personally know the regulations, but I think they are. We were out there Friday a week and a half ago doing some barricade training with class that's going through the school. And so they've got steel out there that's well forward of the impact area, but they're up on T-post where, you know, if you shoot a miss, that bullet is still going to fly on to a berm unless you miss really bad, of course. But, you know, you always have the bullets splatter off the plate. But honestly, if you're moving the T-post around frequently, you don't really suffer any appreciable damage from it. I probably did more damage with my truck in the snow and ice on the curb than those bullets will ever do.
Yeah, I've been stuck down about the 100-yard line in the grass, so I know that feeling well.
Did a little mud plowing out there.
Yeah. Now, when did you guys go away from the Thumbhole stocks?
You can still have a Thumbhole.
Oh, can you?
Yeah, not on the ASR and the ASR, but on the like the AX series. There's still stock sides available to run those as a Thumbhole. You know, the clamshell classic AI stock sides. But we went to the pistol grip configuration with the first generation AX in 2010, and it. You know, once we introduced that, there was really no going back. People vastly preferred it. Hell, I love that Thumbhole, and I preferred the pistol grip. So, and now the current generation of gun has, you know, it's got a full-on AR grip interface. On ASR, we rotated it 10 degrees to allow the grip to come quite vertical. On the ATX, there are newer grips that are made to be very vertical, so we went with a standard orientation on that chassis. But you'll be intrigued by this. The very first AI that had a pistol grip was an L96 Covert folder. And I didn't even know they existed until Marty Bordson at Badger Ordnance bought one and sent me photos of it.
Wow. Yeah, I've never even heard of that.
And then I sent an inquiry to one of our guys in the UK, and it turned out that AI had made 12 of those guns back in the 80s. And for reasons that nobody knows today, they were exported to the United States. And there's got to be like 11 more floating around somewhere.
Wait, exported or smuggled?
they had to, so those guns were exported. Gunsight was the first importer of AI rifles into the U.S., and Marty's gun is engraved with a Gunsight marking.
Wow.
And so it was to be compliant with ATF regulation. They had to get an import permit to bring them in way back. So when I saw those pictures of that L96 Covert, and I was kind of juxtaposing it against the AX, I'm like, wow, there's a lot of family DNA in those.
I can only imagine how much one of those would go for today. Holy cow.
Marty wouldn't tell me what he paid for it, but he's an avid collector, and I think it meant a lot to him to own it. and it's probably worth a lot more today. I think he's probably had it almost 10 years now.
Yeah, I can only imagine how much that thing would run. So, but that would be a cool piece of history to have right there.
If I could personally own an L96, that would be the one I would want.
Okay.
Super rare.
All right. So I had created a huge list of questions. Chris, do you have anything you want to jump in on? Are you good right now? Oh.
Wow.
Good morning.
What's going on here? Hi.
I think we've been monopolizing the dialogue here.
It's actually very educational, and I'm actually enjoying the history of AI and all the information that you're putting out there. Because even when I did some of the research itself on AI, I was kind of like, wow. So even you were giving more information than I'm like, wow, I did not know that. And especially like with the Thumbhole, I saw that I think it was the Green Meanie. I think that one did that one have the Thumbhole in it originally?
Yes. Yeah, it did.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is
The OG.
I mean, completely target gun oriented right there. I mean, the stock, it was a very ergonomic stock for that period on. Like there had never been a sniper rifle that looked remotely like that L96 and that original PM rifle. I mean, they were kind of radical looking, and you know, thinking about the look of that thing and that Thumbhole, I'll never forget the first time I saw an AW rifle. A guy at my home club back then, I lived in Oak Ridge, Tennessee. Brought an AI out, and I thought, my God, that is the ugliest damn rifle I've ever in my life.
That is blasphemy.
You know, but when the more time I spent with those rifles, it did not take long to become a convert, because when you saw the engineering and the features and the way that gun was built, I thought, my God, there's nothing else like this in the world. I mean, it had all of the features you would want in a high spec custom target gun, but it was made for the battlefield.
You know, when Malcolm brought it to the school and I got a chance to look at it, I immediately fell in love because, look, I am an old school dude. I will take a 10 power universal scope over anything they have today, because I will beat you to death with that thing. Literally bludgeon you to death, put it back on my rifle, it'll hold 0, and I can continue to shoot. And that's what I loved about the AI with that aluminum chassis. I was like, I could drop this thing down a mountain, go to the bottom, pick it up with my 10 power universal scope, and it's bulletproof. It's bomb proof.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about the stock coming away from the action. Nothing's going to jiggle loose. It's all one solid piece. You got a steel scope on top. I'm like, how can you go wrong? It's marine proof.
Absolutely. Yeah, you know, it's funny. I still have a pair of Unerdal 20 power target scopes. They're the first real target scopes I ever owned.
That's an old one.
And I gladly would trade one for a 10 power M40 scope.
Yes, I would too. I would trade your scope for one of those. Yeah. Some things I wouldn't do for some things, but that could get me in trouble.
Yeah.
So I had a question because, and I've shot AI. When, again, going back to one of our earlier episodes when Leo and Chris interviewed me, because we did an episode where we interviewed each other, asking a lot of questions. I told them that my favorite gun was the Accuracy International, bar none. That is my dream gun right there. Now, where was I going with this? I just lost where I was going. But I was,
Chris.
but I was on some of the import websites, distributors, and I noticed that the 6.5 Creedmoor offering was lined out. Like it said 6.5 Creedmoor, but then there was a line through the middle of it. Is it just that it's not available right now, or do you have any idea what the? Because I am a fan of the 6.5 Creedmoor.
Yeah, without knowing what model it is, it's hard to answer, but we still like the AX short action. We will still supply that as a 6.5 Creedmoor. And in fact, I think we have to build out and test several of them in the next 2 weeks. And the AT rifle we probably sold that more in 6.5 Creedmoor in the last 2 years than we have in 308. The new rifle, the ATX, which we discussed, was oriented toward PRS and competition. That right now is only available in 6.5 Creedmoor.
Okay.
So if somebody wants to run a 308, they're just going to have to buy a 308 barrel and swap it. But yeah, so we're still very much manufacturing and selling 6.5 Creedmoors.
How popular are your rifles in the 308? Because it seems to be falling out of favor with the military and PRS style shooting.
Yeah, with military and PRS, you're absolutely right. The rest of the world hasn't figured it out yet, and we still sell a lot of 308s. But I've danced with all of these crazy, cool target rounds myself. But at the end of the day, if you need 100% assurance that the thing is going to work, you still want a 308, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't.
Can you see that?
Yeah.
So that's 3 shots at 505 yards with a 308 and a 12-inch barrel, right? We're testing a covert gun that we're going to submit on military trial soon.
Okay.
Federal 168 match right there. Can you believe that? 12-inch barrel with a suppressor on it. And
really, what kind of velocity are you getting out of that, or if you're allowed to say?
Oh, there's no proprietary data there. I think the velocity with a 12-inch barrel was like 2,300 and some change. So out to that 505, it's still supersonic and very accurate, and we extended out to about 820. And
Okay.
the bullet is definitely going subsonic out there. And while it was still accurate, it's getting some vertical in the group at 820. But if you're talking about center of mass shot, you don't want that thing pointed at you.
Right. I guess you're probably maxing out supersonic, what, 700 roughly?
Yeah, God, I hope I won't remember this correctly, but I ran the ballistics and marked the sound barrier crossing, and I think it was in the close 700 range.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And then with a 12-inch barrel, we also like subsonic, like the Lapua subsonic 200 CNR at 100 meters. That thing is like stupid accurate. I mean, way sub MOA. And very quiet. With a suppressor, I think the velocity was just under 1,000 feet per second. So it's like super quiet.
It's like 45 cal.
Yeah.
Goodness.
When it hits steel, it's still packing a punch.
Yeah, I bet. Well, that's still a lot of energy. So.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, Creedmoor, it is a great round. There's no doubt, and a lot of those modern cartridges, like the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 6.5 47, they were really clean sheet of paper designs to be accurate cartridges. When you look at the length of free bore, the neck design, the throat design, everything about them is off. Shoot small groups, And the 308, going back all the years that thing has been in service, that's an amazingly accurate cartridge too. But it's also still probably the most highly developed cartridge in the world because it became a NATO round. So I still have a soft spot for 308.
Right. And I mean, you're right. The 6.5 ballistically is an amazing round. It's just, and I think a lot of people at the time just didn't want to look at it when it first was developed, and it wasn't popular at the time. And so people weren't, and like you said, people weren't going to gravitate to that. Now people are seeing the ballistic, the math, and they're saying, wow, and seeing how great this bullet is, and now they're gravitating towards that. So, but
Well,
I was going to ask another thing with it is the fact that, or at least ask something I was going to say that I saw on your AI rifles, which I kind of liked, was the safety mechanism on there, because you had I call it the 3-stage safety mechanism on your rifles. So I thought that was actually really nice. So,
yeah, that goes back to the AW. I mean, it's a design we've been making over 30 years, and I can talk a little bit about that. It's a firing pin based safety, not a trigger based safety. So when you
Mhm.
engage that safety to the first position, there's a cam in there that literally raises the firing pin cocking piece off of the trigger upper sear. So the trigger no longer has any load on it whatsoever. And in that first stage of the safety, you can open the bolt and unload it, and it is perfectly safe. Now, if you have to move with a live one in the chamber, then you would want to draw it back to the second stage. And that draws the firing pin back a few more thou off of the sear, but now it locks the bolt from moving. So if you just have to move with the gun hot, that's the way to do it. And you can flick into the first stage and do a safe mode. Most of the designs that we're familiar with and the people in our country are familiar with are trigger-based safeties, and some of the more modern ones can be quite good, but I don't have the inherent level of trust in them that I do in safeties that physically block the firing pin from striking the primer. And even the ASR, our newest design, we had to put a 2-position safety on that to meet SOCOM E-spec. And it's sort of a big AR ambidextrous 90-degree sweep safety. So it's different. It's not up there on the firing pin shroud like the classic AI safety, but it still draws that firing pin off of the trigger sear. And there's a variant that they have designed for the European market that is also a 3-position and behaves just like that classic AI. So there's 2 versions of that, but we're still very much a company that believes in mechanically blocking the pin.
Well, I like it. I was very impressed with it when I actually saw it and then saw the video on the website. So
Yeah. A lot of people don't understand the mechanics of those things, and that video has everything kind of, you can see into the mechanism, how it operates. Pretty cool.
yeah,
Finishing off the 6.5, I think it's taking a little while, but I think people are starting to see the fact that it can be a dual role hunting and competition round with the distance you can get out of that thing. But going back to the 308, it's still a very utility round. I still like that one a lot, and there's a lot of availability with the 308. 6.5 not quite as much, but it's getting there. It's definitely growing in popularity. Now, I noticed something else on your AX50. I saw you guys have a 45 MOA rail on there.
Mm-hmm.
What, with that rail, what type of distance are you looking to be able to achieve without having to hold high or anything like that?
That will, with the scope on it, like 5 to 25, a modern, Schmidt Bender or Night Force, it's got about 130 minutes of movement. With that 40-minute rail, you can get out to around 2,500 operating distance.
That is nice.
That's a long poke.
That is a long way.
Yeah.
You better
Yeah,
have a nice clear scope or you're not going to see much at that distance.
Yeah. In the Western states where you typically go to, shoot those distances, I mean, the optics we have today are staggeringly good.
Right.
You can, I think my favorite scope for the last several years, I've got two of them, is the Night Force 5 to 25 Beast, which I was very sad to see disappeared from the 2021 catalog. But the glass in those things is amazing. The turret clicks are the best of anything ever made. They're absolutely bomb proof, and I think they've got 130 minutes of travel vertically.
That's nice. That's the one thing I've seen. It seems like we're losing travel vertically. So,
well, yeah, I mean, because people want more focal range. Like my next favorite scope is the 7 to 35 Night Force, which is, I mean, it's been a triple crown win for them. That scope is enormously popular and it's very good. But in order to get out to 35 power, give up some travel. I think it's, God, don't quote me on this. It's like 115 or 20 minutes. You give up about a good 10 minutes versus 5 to 25 scopes. And sometimes that, that last little bit is what you need. It's
yeah, absolutely.
shocked at some of the shots I've been able to dial. I mean, with a 5 to 25 on a 30 MOA rail, like a AXMC, you can get right out to about 2,000 with a 338. Now that's altitude dependent. I'll qualify that. You need to be at elevation to get that kind of bullet performance.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to interject a little bit, but with a statement, because it's the L115A3 that the gentleman, the British sniper, used to make the world record longest shot.
Yeah, that would.
Correct on that?
Yeah, that'd be Craig Harrison and the L115A3. Correct. I believe the optic was Schmidt Bender 5 to 25. Yeah. And that was with 250 grain ammo to boot. They were not issuing 300 grain ammo during that time frame. And but in Afghanistan, that was helped by altitude and air density that was favorable to making a long shot.
Still amazing you can identify something at that distance.
It is really, and it all depends on the atmospheric conditions. Like I've shot out in the western states, and sometimes on a hot afternoon, if you're fairly horizontal with the terrain, the Mirage can be diabolical. But in the early morning and late afternoon, if you've got some elevation, it's absolutely crystal clear. I mean, out to even 2 miles.
Absolutely. Totally agree. I mean, you can see that just at Quantico shooting the 1,000-yard line, the Mirage on the targets when it starts heating up out there. So if you're if you're close to the ground, that's going to be difficult in a lot of heat. You
Yeah.
got to be up off the ground so you don't see that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Scott, are you ever gone out and shot in the and I see it every now and then, but the King of the 2 Mile competitions?
Funny you should ask. So I actually was involved in the very first 2 years that competition was held at Raton, New Mexico. And I didn't know anything about it, but Dave Walls from AI was coming over to shoot the FCSA 50 Cal Shooters Association Championship, which is 1,000-yard bench rest match for 50s. And the guy who was the president of FCSA at the time had dreamed up this King of 2 Miles because he was kind of looking for a way to sort of expand the appeal and the kind of shooting they were doing with these big guns. Honestly, when you shoot a 50 at 1,000 yards, you know that gun's got a lot more in it than poking a hole in a paper target at a grand. And so that's kind of the driving idea behind King of 2 Miles. And so I really helped organize that trip to Raton for Dave, and there were like 5 other guys that came over from the UK, and they were kind of had a UK team. And I didn't shoot, but I got sucked into coaching them on this King of 2 Miles. So I'm like, what the hell is King of 2 Miles? And so I found out what they were doing. I'm like, my God, I don't even know how fast these bullets are going. So 2 days before the match, we flew into Denver and we staged all of our gear up at Mile High Shooting Accessories, who's our distributor in Denver. And one of their guys took us out to a range near Fort Morgan, and we got velocity and got some good dope on the guns. And I really, the struggle was I was trying to build a ballistic curve for distances I'd never shot anything like before. And a big part of the learning from King of 2 Miles that first year was that the ballistic solvers were not very good past about 1,500. Even at 1,500, they had gross errors. And so I had been online we were shooting Hornady AMAX bullets in all of these AX50s these guys were shooting. And so I thought, well, I'm going to use Hornady's ballistic program. And I'd even called Dave Emery, who was still with Hornady at the time, and talked to him about these curves. And so I worked out dope for these rifles, and I had a big spotting scope and tripod. And on the first stage of King of 2 Miles, the first shot was out about 1,550-ish yards. And there were 6 teams. These are 2-man teams that shot ahead of our first guy, who was Dave Walls. And you would get 5 shots at that first target, and you had to hit it at least once to advance to the second target. Well, 6 teams went up, and nobody had hit that target, and nobody even knew where the bullets were going. And I'm starting to get pretty nervous. You know, the big guy is over from the UK, and, you know, it doesn't matter how it goes down. If you're the coach, you're responsible for the outcome, right?
Right.
I thought, damn, they have to be shooting over the target. The terrain was such that I thought if anybody shot short, we would have seen something, some sort of dust or something.
Right.
And I said to Dave, I said, okay, Dave, I said, we're going to sacrifice the first shot. And I brought him in 2 mils lower than my computed dope. So 2 mils is a lot.
Yeah.
He fired the first shot, and the wind call was perfect. And the bullet hit just short of the bottom of the target. And I'm like, yes, we got it now. And I gave him a correction, and I had him shoot quickly, and he put the next 4 shots into that target. And then everybody's like, they're going over. Whatever you do, you're probably 1.5 to 2 mils high.
Right.
So we were kind of the guinea pig team, and both Dave and a gentleman named Graham Creasy, who I coached, made the top 10 cutoff, and they got to advance to the second day of shooting. And so that first year, I think there were probably something like about 40-ish shooters, maybe about 20 teams. The second year, it just exploded. I mean, there was like 3 times as many people, and they had to move it to a different location. And guys showed up with some crazy super custom guns, and it got all serious then. And we went back and shot a second year, and the conditions were a lot different. And there were more guys from the UK, and it was hard to manage all the dope. But I felt like I had better success with the first year with really 2 shooters that I had good dope on those guns. And after that, we haven't been back anymore. We've been there to shoot the FCSA when they're wrapping up King of 2 Miles. And it's become really kind of a science project. And I'm not sure, I'm personally not willing to invest the resources and money into one gun to go out there and get to shoot at like 5 targets. It's incredibly expensive. The learning from that is that everybody that advances to the second day of shooting, the match is won on day 1. Usually the guy who's got the biggest points accumulation from day 1 is likely to end up winning or placing second. And very few of the shooters, like out of that top 10, I think maybe last year 3 people hooked up at 2 miles. So the hit probability at 2 miles is still incredibly low. It's still very much a crapshoot. If I built a gun to shoot 2 miles, it wouldn't be what guys are shooting today. I'd probably come with a 20 millimeter or something.
Right.
Laugh now.
Like an 80 caliber.
If you want to hit a target at 2 miles, you need a gun that you can't fire from the shoulder. And I don't mean to offend anybody who's having fun with that sport, but I think we're still a long way in terms of technology and equipment to be able to reliably engage a target at 2 miles. But
I would agree.
It has certainly brought some advancements like scope prisms. Those are so. So yeah, I do have a little bit of experience, but for the time I'm able to take away from my job and go shoot, there's other types of shooting I want to do more.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a very it's more like you said, a science project. You go out there and it's being able to see what technology or try to help advance the technology and stuff of that nature. So yeah, I like it. I think it's a pretty neat little competition just to watch the guys shoot it. Again, like you said, it becomes expensive, and but it's a fun science project.
Yeah, and then everything about it is completely experimental. The bullets, many of the cartridges, the guns, the optic systems. And there's no doubt any time as a community we go down a road like King of 2 Miles, we learn a lot from it, and the best of those learnings will filter down into other systems, and we'll have a net gain from it. But being able to engage targets at 2 miles is still kind of out there, and it's more hope than reality.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would say hope is never a strategy.
Nope.
Yeah, yeah.
Not one to bet on
Uh,
anyway.
Yeah.
all right, Dave. I was having fun with that. That was my big thing I wanted to ask you, and I thank you very much for the response.
You're most welcome. I mean, our newest long range gun that's an update of the AX50 is just called the ELR, and it's a multi cal 50 platform.
Oh,
Okay.
And that, you know, you'll be able to run that in 50 or the 408 or 375 Shaytac, you know, easily. It's a no-brainer that you can run a 416 Barrett in that. But that ability to change barrels, I think that gun will appeal to some of those ELR and King of 2 Mile shooters. And I mentioned that Frank Green from Bartlein was here yesterday, and I've ordered a couple of test barrels from Bartlein and 375 Shaytac. Like, we'll chamber them. They're making the blanks, but it will be there. They'll finish at 31 inches and be carbon wrapped. So they won't be quite as long as some of the KO2M barrels, but the weight of that barrel is really pretty favorable for a 31-inch barrel for a serious ELR gun. I'm anxious to take one of those out west and you know, shoot some long targets with it, you know, out
yeah.
to 2,500 range.
Absolutely.
Well, I definitely be watching. So when you video it, make sure you post it because I'll be either watching it live. If you put it on Facebook Live or YouTube, I definitely will be tuning in to watch that to see what happens.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the only question that we really haven't touched on that I had in here was, does Accuracy International have an accuracy requirement for their guns?
We do. Well, that's probably the most open-ended question you've asked today, but I will absolutely talk about it. So our standard that we will say publicly is our guns have to shoot at least one MOA with available factory ammunition. And, you know, we live in a world where people brag about their quarter MOA guns, right? And, but at AI, we live in the world of data, and we live in the world where we have to make guns that shoot real ammunition that's loaded by major companies. And so, you know, we get phone calls every week where people are asking that question, and a lot of times we're like, "Well, you mean your gun will only shoot an MOA?" I said, no, that's not what I said. I said it must always shoot at least an MOA. But if you were to take, say, one of our AT308s and just load it up with Federal 168, if the conditions are good, those guns will lean hard on a quarter of a minute with factory ammo, right? You go out on a shit day, you might struggle to shoot 3/4 of a minute. So a lot of this is condition dependent, but we're looking to bring in a new targeting system at the range in the UK and then replicate that here in the US, where we'll have an optical target system. A company out of Germany called Maton makes them. And as a company, we're going to a mean radius metric to define accuracy. And most shooters don't understand, well, what the hell is a mean radius? But the thing about a mean radius is if you shoot 5 shots or 10 shots, you compute the mean radius, but from all of the shots that you fired. When somebody says, "Oh, my gun shoots, say, a half a minute of angle for 5 shots, and it's an extreme spread," well, you're throwing away 60% of your data by measuring an ES. And the ES does not tell you anything about the quality of the group. Like what is the standard deviation, for example, in vertical and horizontal? What is the radial standard deviation of the group? At AI in the UK, we're making our own cut rifle barrels in house now, and I think tomorrow they'll be testing the first two 6.5 Creedmoor barrels to come off of that rifling machinery. And we had a meeting yesterday talking about how they will be tested. And Lee Riley had data from a Bartlein barrel that, of course, everybody knows how those guns perform. It was chambered here in the U.S. at our company over here. And I think the mean radius on that was about 0.2 for 25 data points. Pretty good. And then the horizontal and vertical dispersion and the standard deviation. When you're able to get this sort of data, you can assess the real performance of a gun. And so I think in the future, it will be harder for us to talk to an average shooter about accuracy in terms that they will understand. But we will certainly have the best data we've ever had about rifle performance.
Okay.
Like I do a very similar manual test on my personal guns. It takes more time to measure the shots, and I developed a little Excel spreadsheet where if I test a 10-shot series out of one of my own guns, I will shoot 10 shots at 10 different aiming points. And when I'm finished, I will measure the vertical and horizontal displacement of the shot from the aim point. So now I have a Cartesian coordinate. And so with 10 shots, I have 10 coordinates, and I can put that data into Excel, and it will compute the horizontal and vertical dispersion. It will compute the standard deviation vertically and horizontally. It will compute the mean radius of the group, and it will give me the radial standard deviation. So I have a very complete picture of the performance of every shot that I shot through that gun for testing.
Now, do you wait a certain period of time in between each shot?
Yeah, yeah, I think I'm getting low on battery on this laptop, by the way. Can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, you are catching your there's a little hitch in your giddy up at times.
Yeah, this battery is this laptop's getting a little bit old.
And he's frozen.
I thought that was actually a good question that you asked him about how long he waits in between each shot, and which is going to be, very interesting. Well, hopefully he comes back on, because I'd be curious on how, his wait time, downtime, pause time,
Right.
whatever word we want to use for it, but that's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. So, or his answer, I should say.
Right.
But yeah, it's I think it's really cool. He's like, man, I'm like, and you are in a perfect area to maybe see if you go down there and say, hey, look, I'll help you test it out,
Yeah, I would love to.
I know, especially that 6.5 Creedmoor that's coming out, or that they're going to take out there.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to be doing that testing overseas, though, and not here, but still.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he says to test it over there and then bring it back here and test it here. So, yeah, I tell you, I love this AI information. This is good stuff. like I said, I really never looked into Accuracy International. I've heard of it, but I never really delved into it. And now to be able to talk to Scott and to get all this great information, one, like I said earlier, one, the background history about it and what's happening now and all the new products that's coming out, I think that's awesome. So I'm glad that we got this opportunity to actually speak with Scott about all this great information. And I hope, there he is.
Yeah. Hey, do we have audio?
We do now.
All right. I just restarted the live stream software there. Sorry about that. My laptop, I wasn't plugged into the charger. The battery went completely flat, so I wasn't going to be able to wake it up in time to get back.
Well, that's all I had, Scott. That's a lot of information on your testing, that's for sure.
Well, I hope you got enough for a podcast and that listeners enjoy it. It was really a pleasure meeting you guys and getting to talk to you.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, you've made me start to lean towards looking at the Accuracy International product. So I might have to work some overtime.
Well, you won't regret it. You hear it a lot. Try once, and once you spend the money, you won't regret it. My life is full of stuff like that. I needed a good spotting scope a few years ago with first focal plane with the reticle. And I ended up buying a Hensel Spotter 45, and it took me about 6 months to get my mind right and do it. And then after I bought it, I thought, why did I wait? So an AI is like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I say thank you very much, Scott. I appreciate you coming on here. I've got a lot of good information. I hope that we can maybe actually all three of us can get together sometime and come down there and see your facility and everything. And
by all means,
maybe
yeah, and hopefully see you guys at Quantico and do some shooting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Scott. We appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure is all mine. Well, thanks so much, and thanks again to the audience. I hope you enjoyed it. If you ever have questions, people can always call us at AI. Here to inform people about our products.
Until next time,
don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.